And so, if you look at water alone, I mean, water is so critical. And if you look at the reporter's rapporteur's report, 2013, very current, page 132 of 2I. And if you look at paragraph 58, it says, under heading Water and Sanitation, during the mission of the Special Rapporteur to the Gaza Strip in December 2012, a number of interlocutors raised serious concerns about the lack of clean water and adequate sanitation facilities in the Gaza Strip. Some of these issues were briefly touched upon in the previous report of the Special Rapporteur to the Human Rights Council in the context of the near-exclusive control by Israel over all underground and surface water resources in Palestine. The Special Rapporteur reiterates his concerns regarding the occupation-induced water and sanitation crisis. In the Gaza Strip, 90% of water in the underlying coastal aquifer beneath the Gaza Strip is unfit for human consumption as a result of pollution caused by raw sewage and rising seawater infiltration. In 2012, the UN reported that the coastal aquifer on which the Gaza Strip is almost completely reliant could become unusable as early as 2016, with the deterioration becoming irreversible by 2020. The Israeli blockade of Gaza has exacerbated water scarcity and lack of adequate sanitation facilities. Water scarcity in Gaza has been worsened by the repeated destruction of water and sanitation in infrastructure in the course of Israeli military operations. Israel has destroyed at least 306 wells in the access-restricted areas of Gaza since 2005. In this context, the Special Rapporteur strongly condemns the targeting of water and sanitation facilities during Israeli military operations, which cannot be justified as a military necessity and cannot be explained as a consequence of accidents. Palestinians in the West Bank are denied their rightful share of water from the underground mountain aquifer and prevented from accessing water from the Jordan River, which are both classified as shared water resources and thus must be shared equitably under customary international law. An estimated 500,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem enjoy approximately 6 times the amount of water used by the Palestinian population of 2.6 million. Israeli settlers enjoy ample amounts of water channeled directly to the settlements, which allows settlers to irrigate agricultural land and grow water-intensive crops. In contrast, Palestinian farmers depend largely on water supplies transported in tankers or collected by water cisterns, raising agricultural costs and restricting most Palestinian agriculture to unprofitable, small-scale operations growing grain-fed crops, which on average is 15 times less profitable than irrigated crops. The loss of scarce Palestinian water resources occur not only through demolitions undertaken by Israeli authorities of illegal water collection facilities, including wells and water collection tanks, but also as a result of deep water drilling activities by Israeli water companies. The Special Rapporteur is also concerned by acts of violence by settlers in the vicinity of Palestinian communities. There are several reports of Palestinian springs being taken over by settlers and fenced off. Israel systematically blocks the development of the Palestinian wastewater and sanitation sector through bureaucratic constraints imposed by the Joint Water Committee and the Israel Civil Administration. Between 1995 and 2011, only 4 out of 30 Palestinian wastewater treatment plant proposals were approved by the committee, and their construction has been repeatedly delayed. Meanwhile, Israeli authorities profit from the occupation-induced crisis by treating up to 21% of Palestinian sewage, and so on. And that is established inside Israel and paid for by Palestinian tax revenues withheld by Israel. So tax revenues that Palestine is supposed to get are withheld by Israel every time, and then they supply you with water at very high cost, and then they take it out of the revenue that is supposed to go onto Gaza. So this is the condition. And in fact, you go visually there, you can see settlements. People have swimming pools. They're on high ground. People have swimming pools. While here, they can't get waters to irrigate their agricultural land. At page 21, conditions of life, harassment, arrests. I quoted a report. People are arrested. We saw Jawad, Dr. Wahid, threatened. All right, Nabil, young boy, Jawad, his legs. And Jawad made it quite clear that his is only one case amongst those that are occurring all of the time. And there is a report by the Palestinian Cultural Organization which we have presented, which we have made available, which says the number of Palestinian prisoners and detainees in Israeli prisons and detention centers has reached 4,750 people from every sector of Palestinian society. 17 prisons, detention centers, 186 administrative centers, 13 women, and so on and so forth. They arrest legislative council members, 3 former ministers, large number of Palestinian officials, sick prisoners, elderly prisoners. There is torture, there is death, there is refusal to hand over even remains of dead prisoners. And we saw with our own eyes through television how even the PLO at that time, the whole place was sieged. Any food going in and out, even to Yasser Arafat, who was an acknowledged head of the Palestinian people, had to go through Israeli security. And now we find there are concerns that Arafat was poisoned, and had poisoned through food, and poisoned by polonium, the existence of polonium. And at that time, that whole PLO the building was sieged, nobody could go in, nobody could go out without Israeli authorization. Then, if we look at impact, I have Dr. Paola talked of weapons on reproductive health, on population of Gaza. We have seen Paola's very almost dramatic, powerful testimony correlating weapons with tetragenic and carcinogenic effects in the soil that will continue to persist. So there is even a slow murder that remains in the soils emanating from the weapons that have been deposited in the soil by these Israeli genocidists, if I like to call them that. I'm going to conclude with 2 short aspects relating to the law. The physical element, as I said at my page 22, you only need to prove that one or more victims actually suffered physical or mental harm with regard to the actual killings. So if this act is perpetrated with a requisite mental element, then the crime is committed. Only 1 or 2, and here we have 3,500 Kaslet, 1,400 in Sabra Shatila, 3,500 in Sabra Shatila. Then just in the 22 days in Kaslet, there was just the killing alone is 1,400. And then what about the other rains that have been falling? They are white phosphorus, the summer rains and the autumn clouds and the Daya. And the one only 3 days ago was as well. And sewage is floating down from the highlands to the lowlands. Gaza is almost unlivable even as we speak now. Because sewage is one of the main things they target, water tanks, the public utilities, and so on and so forth. They don't even have enough electricity. You can't get that because then they bomb that, the first thing they bomb, and then they keep bombing, and then they allow some construction a little bit, and then they bomb it again before you can do anything else. That is the life. This is what we call genocide. This is the face of genocide as we saw it through the witnesses. And this is what this tribunal of conscience must deal with. Not this sophistry, esoteric technical rules about, all the kind of technical, although we must keep in mind the overarching concern of fairness, transparency, and fairness. So the physical element, even if you deprive, you see, Nazis reduced the amount of food in occupied territories to 400 and even 200 calories per day. This was considered an act that is genocidal. And here we have water that is reduced. I have reports here. Water that is reduced to below the amount that is required by WHO standards. Right? So even omission amounts to acts of genocide. It's not just commission. And then in the AG Israel against Eichmann case, when you talk about serious bodily or mental harm, It could be caused by persecution, detention in ghettos, transit camps, concentration camp conditions, which were designed to cause their deprivation of their rights as human beings and so on. This is announced by an Israeli Supreme Court against Eichmann when they, Nazi war criminal. Right now, deliberately, one of our main areas, of course, is the killing, etc. But we also are talking about deliberately inflicting conditions of life. So what are the acts that relate to this? And in my paragraph 23, I've set up. This includes inter alia, paragraph 23, under 11.4a, includes, amongst other things, subjecting a group to a subsistence diet, systematic expulsion from homes, and the reduction of essential medical services below minimum requirements. And the case is cited. It's a contemporary case, Akayesa. Creating circumstances leading to a slow death, including systematic expulsion from homes. And you don't even need to prove outcome. In other words, it is immaterial in Eichmann, they said, whether you succeed or not. But you set in motion this, as they have indeed done. It does not result in the killing of all. It matters not, but you have initiated. So when we talk about actus reus, these are the acts. You have initiated these acts, and this suffices in law. Includes methods of destruction which do not immediately lead to the death of members of the group. Includes circumstances which will lead to a slow death. For example, lack of proper housing, clothing, hygiene, and medical care. And I've mentioned this. And I quoted the case, the Guatemala case, committed against the Mayan people by the Guatemalan army. They razed villages, they destroyed properties, including working fields, burnt houses. This infliction was sufficient to constitute conditions of life that could bring about, and in several cases did bring about, the destruction in whole or in part. There we have a decision of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. So it's across the globe, right? So even that regional court has so decided. Now, as far as the law is concerned, we have Article 30 of the Rome Statute, intent and knowledge. Intent intends to engage in, or means to cause the consequence, or is aware that in ordinary course of event, this will occur. So when you bomb people, when you carry out this activity, if you know that in the ordinary course of events it will occur, it is no excuse for you. Knowledge, awareness that a circumstance or a consequence will occur in the ordinary course of events. And then, as regards knowledge, which is quite fundamental in this case, you don't even need actually to prove plan or policy, although of course it will facilitate proof. And we have shown how this is a consistent policy from pre-1948, Plan Dulles until now, the expulsion. We had the very lucid evidence of Professor Pape on this. So if you know the circumstances, then you know what will result from the circumstances. That is intent. And in the case against Karadzic and Mladic, the former Yugoslavia case, they were charged with genocide. The intent was inferred from a number of facts, such as general political doctrine, repetition of destructive and discriminatory acts, perpetration of acts which violate the very foundation of the group. So it's a pattern of conduct, and we have listed the case and its citation. So this in itself, in contemporary criminal jurisprudence, international criminal jurisprudence, is sufficient to found the intent, the specialis dolus, specific intent for genocide. And in Akayesu, page 25, the ICTR for the Rwanda said there was no need for the policy to be formally adopted. So it's not a question of where, show us the policy, show us the document. Defines, there is no need for that. Although we can show from the circumstances preconceived plan or policy. Necessary in the Kayishema case, the Rwandan case, for an individual to have knowledge of all the details of the genocidal plan or policy. So those young boys we saw in the West Bank who were at the checkpoint, just young guys, we saw them very young, just following the one fellow said, please put me in a nice light. That West checkpoint video was being done by a person from Israel. That's why he was allowed to do it. Others won't be allowed to do that. All right? And then he said, I will look bad, isn't it? At the end, he said, this young boy. I said, please put me in a good light. And the fellow said, what kind of good light? He said, just say I was following orders. So it's true. These young boys are just following orders. Many of them, as Ilan Pape said, are new-come settlers. These are people who have come 3 years before that, and they have settled there, and they joined the army, and all of them have to join the IDF. And then they are stationed, and they have to carry out these brutal activities. And Ilan Pape talked about the evidence he collected from those who, what was it called, breaking the silence, officers and IDF officers who felt bad about Kaslan and gave him that information about the incredible acts that were going on. So even if you have genocidal intent of some of the members, then in law it suffices. So if really we are looking at, and I've again cited here, what would under the circumstances be deduced from the acts of the principal perpetrators, looking at the mind of a reasonable man. And then recklessness as to consequences suffices. In other words, they should have known. You cannot say, I didn't know that if I do this, then it will result in this consequence. If you willful blindness also suffices. Deliberately failing to inquire and know that such inquiry should be taken also suffices. So that's knowledge. So intent, the specialis dolis, established. You can have proof usually through speeches, public declarations, meetings. I'm in my page, third last page, 26. Proof through speeches, public declaration, meetings, statements, and we have an abundant amount of that. The most pointed one of which was, let's commit Shoah, and the 6 months later the Shoah started. So the context of crime, its massive scale, elements of its perpetration that suggest a particular animus towards the group and a desire for its destruction. So you can look at it from the scale in all these places that we're talking about. And it's a matter of inference. The factors establishing intent include general context, carrying out other acts systematically directed against the same group, scale of atrocities committed, systematic targeting of victims on account of their membership of a particular group, or the repetition of destructive and discriminatory acts. And this is the case of Simba, which we have included. And there is no need for premeditation. Destroy, we have looked at it. What does destroy mean? Because it says conditions of life intended to destroy. There's an extended meaning of destroy. Even if it is not accompanied by killing, it suffices. It can be destruction of the political structure, culture, economy, displacement. All these constitute genocide when the consequence is the dissolution of the group. And this is the case of Blagojevic. And part means considerable number or substantial part, or a distinct part, significant enough to have an impact. And we heard all the Palestinian victims say that this affects the whole of the Palestinian population. And even the report, UN Commission of Experts report appointed by the Security Council, talk about exterminating of a group's law enforcement, military such as to render them helpless against future acts, particularly if the leadership is being eliminated. And it's common knowledge that Israel targets in Gaza, for example, they have targeted attacks against the leadership wherever it is. We have heard about it. It's so common that I did not feel I needed to even prove this particular fact. It's a matter of common knowledge. And then we have, to conclude, Your Honours, we submit that the cumulative effect of the action taken by the Israeli government, as proven by the prosecution, has shown beyond reasonable doubt, people are laughing at it, has shown beyond reasonable doubt that Israel is guilty of the crime of genocide under the Genocide Convention and the Care War Crimes Charter. Accordingly, we ask this Honorable Tribunal to find the State of Israel guilty of the crime of genocide. In this way, may the cry for justice by the Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and the diaspora, long ignored by the world community, be finally assuaged. This will bring some form of closure to the first part of their quest for justice, a stepping stone hereafter for civilized states in this civilized world to exercise universal jurisdiction. Thousands are dead, thousands mourn, a whole ethnic populace is now the living dead, almost at the mercy of the State of Israel. that strides the world as a colossus with impunity and which now inflicts its updated and technologically advanced version of the Holocaust on a virtually defenseless peoples called Palestinians. Palestinians who refuse to yield and so will fight for their God-given right to life and to live sustainably and with human dignity. Those who testified here want closure and justice for themselves and for their kin. Nay, all those who since that fateful years, since the 1940s and persisting to the present are the victims of a genocide reality. To conclude, I can do no better than quote the words of the Guatemalan Nobel laureate for literature, Miguel Angel Asturias. The eyes of the buried will close together on the day of justice, or they will never close. Your Honors, I thank you.